In 30 minutes, Sport Today. Here's Maz Faruqi.
It's almost impossible to predict Manchester United's next step in this topsy-turvy season, but Ruben Amorim's side are 90 minutes away from a place in the Europa League final, which could bring silverware, but more importantly, European Champions League football back to Old Trafford.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
At 18 hours GMT, you're listening to the Newsroom from the BBC World Service. I'm Julia McFarlane.
White smoke billowing out of the Sistine Chapel chimney. This is breaking news. We have a new pope.
The new pope is Robert Prevost, an American cardinal from Chicago. The bells in the Vatican heralded the election of the 267th pope as cheers erupted from the thousands of people gathered in St. Peter's Square. He takes the name Leo XIV and is the first pope to come from the United States. In other news, President Trump announces a trade deal with the UK.
This morning I'm thrilled to announce that we have reached a breakthrough trade deal with the United Kingdom. Incredible country. We feel very, very comfortable with that because it's been a great ally, truly one of our great allies.
And Bill Gates announces plans to die poor after giving away his fortune. That's all after the latest world news.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. The new Pope is Robert Prevost, the first ever American to lead the Roman Catholic Church. The 69-year-old has chosen the name of Leo XIV. The news was announced to the tens of thousands thronging St. Peter's Square in the Vatican just over an hour after white smoke billowed from a chimney atop the Sistine Chapel.
Habemus Papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost. Qui sibi nomen imposuit, Leonem XIV.
Our correspondent in Rome, Mariam Mosheri, watched as the new pope appeared on the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square.
Jubilation amongst the crowd. I can see a crowd of nuns waving at the new pope as he smiles benignly down to the masses. A moment ago, you saw a close-up of his face. He truly looked like the weight of the emotions was sitting heavy in his heart. But he looked happy.
In his first address, Pope Leo called on Roman Catholics to build bridges using dialogue to unite people in peace. Robert Prevost was born in Chicago into a family of Italian, French and Spanish origins. He went to high school at a seminary run by the Order of St. Augustine. Aged 27, he joined the Augustinian order and was sent to study in Rome. He worked for many years as a missionary in Peru before being made Archbishop of Chiclayo. He visited orders around the world and speaks Spanish and Italian. Those who know him say he strikes a balanced figure with a solid judgment and a capacity to listen. In other news, India says 3 military stations near the international border in Indian-administered Kashmir have been targeted by Pakistani missiles and drones. If confirmed, the attack would be a significant escalation of the conflict. Anbaratan Ethirajan reports from Delhi.
The Indian authorities have imposed a complete blackout in several northern cities, including Jammu, Srinagar and Chandigarh. Some residents of Jammu on social media said they could see red flashes and projectiles in the sky. The area is home to some key Indian military installations. There are also reports of heavy artillery fire across parts of the international border.
This is the latest world news from the BBC. The Microsoft founder Bill Gates says he'll give away almost his entire fortune over the next 2 decades before closing down his foundation. He's earmarked about $200 billion for global health, agriculture and education programs, saying he doesn't intend to die rich. But he said no philanthropic organization could make up what he called the gulf in funding left by recent aid cuts in the US, as well as Britain, France and elsewhere. President Trump and the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer have announced a breakthrough deal on trade which will reduce duties and open markets. Sir Keir said the new rates would come into force as soon as possible. Peter Ruddick has the details.
The UK will be able to export 100,000 cars a year to America with a 10% tariff, substantially lower than the current 27.5% rate, and much lower than the rate on other countries' vehicles. Tariffs on British steel and aluminium will be reduced to zero. In return, the UK has agreed to reciprocal market access between the two countries for beef. However, the Prime Minister said there would be no weakening of British food standards.
The Turkish authorities have barred access to the social media account of Istanbul's jailed opposition mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. They say one of his tweets is under investigation for incitement to crime. Mr. İmamoğlu has been rallying his supporters in Turkey by social media with regular messages posted with the help of his lawyers. He's been behind bars since March on corruption charges, which he denies. A conservation charity has admitted that human rights abuses were committed by its rangers in Congo-Brazzaville, the Republic of the Congo. This follows an independent review into allegations made by members of the Baka community against African Parks rangers. Community members accuse them of beating and raping local people to stop them from accessing their ancestral forests. BBC News.
You're listening to the Newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Julia McFarlane. Let's start today in the Vatican, where cardinals have elected the first American pope to lead the Roman Catholic Church. Cardinal Robert Prevost from Chicago has taken the name Pope Leo XIV. This was the announcement in Latin by Cardinal Dominic Mamberti.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus papam.
And the cardinal said, "We have a pope." Shortly afterwards, the new pope took to the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica in front of more than 40,000 worshippers. The newly elected Pope Leo XIV addressed the crowd, sharing a message of peace. He spoke in Italian, and his words have been translated.
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi, questo è il primo saluto del Cristo risorto.
Greeting of Christ resurrected. The good shepherd who has given his life for the flock of God. And I would also like this greeting of peace to enter into our hearts in order to reach our families, your families, to all people, all of you, wherever you are, to all people, to all of earth. May peace be with you.
Questa è la pace di Cristo risorto.
This is the peace of Christ resurrected.
In una pace disarmante, umile,
disarms us, but which also builds us up, which is perseverant, which comes from God, God which loved us, who loves all of us unconditionally.
Ancora conserviamo nei nostri orecchi quella voce debole ma sempre coraggiosa di Papa Francesco che benediva Roma.
And Pope Francis, may he be with us as we bless Rome.
Il Papa che benediva Roma dava la sua benedizione al mondo
gave his blessing to the world, to the entire world, to the whole world, on the day of Easter, on Easter Sunday. And once again, I'd like to pass on that blessing. God loves us, God loved you, God loved all of us, and evil will not prevail, We are all in the hands of God.
Well, Pope Leo especially paid tribute to his predecessor, Francis. For the latest from St. Peter's Square, delighted to say I'm joined by our correspondent, Mark Lowen. Mark, it was quite an exciting moment here in the BBC newsroom. A lot of people getting excited when the white smoke came and when we saw him emerge on the balcony, but I suspect it was a bit more exciting where you are.
Julia, it was just an extraordinary moment because actually I was on air for the BBC World Service just saying that we hadn't got any smoke, so it suggested that the popes had not reached a decision, and then suddenly out of the blue at about 7 minutes past 6 p.m. Italian time, this almighty cheer went up as the Sistine Chapel chimney started billowing smoke and everybody realized it was white, and then the bells of St. Peter's Basilica chimed to confirm that it was indeed white smoke. And this square where I am now, which was packed with tens of thousands of people, just became so emotional. There were cheers, there was applause, there were people, little kids sitting on the shoulders of parents to watch this moment, that feeling that they were witnessing a historic moment for the Catholic Church and its 1.4 billion followers. And then, once again, expectation as we waited and we turned our gaze from the Sistine Chapel chimney a little bit to the left to the balcony of the glorious 16th century St. Peter's Basilica, where the red curtains were closed, and we waited for the next Pope to come out. And then as Cardinal Mamberti of France came out and announced him, and announced the first ever American Pope, the first ever North American Pope, but a man who also has Peruvian nationality and has spent so much time in Latin America, in a sense kind of uniting the global North and the global South. Just a moment of real ecstasy and jubilation here on St. Peter's Square.
Mark, you mentioned that people feel like there is a sense of history and a historic new papacy in many ways. You mentioned he's the first Pope from America, but this has also been the most diverse conclave in many years. We're seeing pictures of people around the world carrying flags. There have never been so many cardinals from countries around the world as there has been in the conclave this week.
Indeed, it's the biggest ever conclave with 133 cardinals and the most geographically diverse, with cardinals from 70 different countries. So many of us thought that this could drag on for another day or two, possibly into Friday or even the week, or not Saturday, because if it had gone until, if it had been inconclusive at the end of Friday, they would have retired for a day of prayer on Saturday. But that's all past history now, because we know that it was on the second day of the conclave that the cardinal electors found their man. They reached 89 votes, a two-thirds majority in the cardinal electors, and they chose Robert Francis Prevost. He was cardinal in 2023 by Pope Francis. He was born in Chicago, but he was Bishop of Chiclayo in Peru, and spent a lot of his time in Peru. So as I say, you know, he's got that kind of Latin American feel to him as well. A man who I think many people feel will kind of be a continuity from Pope Francis in terms of his views. He is seen as a reformer to a large extent. He's very close to late Pope Francis' views on the environment, his outreach to the poor and to migrants, and that was really a kind of a theme of his inaugural address here on St. Peter's Square as he came out to the cheers and the delight of the tens of thousands of people here. He talked about the word that really was most often in his speech was peace. And that's so important in the world in which we live at the moment, with wars raging in Gaza and Ukraine and in parts of Africa and elsewhere. This is a Pope who clearly will want his papal message, his first papal message, to be defined by peace, by humility, by dialogue, talking about the need to walk together, to build a church of dialogue. He broke into Spanish at one point and made a reference, a shout out to Chiclayo, the city of which he was bishop in Peru. That got a lot of cheers, of course, from the Spanish-speaking people here on St. Peter's Square. So now we have a 267th Pope, and it is, a very, very historic moment.
Oh, Mark, it's so great to hear your reaction and your summing up of this momentous day in Rome. Mark Lowen for us, live in the Vatican in St. Peter's Square. Now, Craig is from America, and he was also there at the square when Pope Leo emerged. He says he could barely contain his emotions.
Completely overwhelmed. Completely overwhelmed. I'm not. I can't stop crying. I'm overjoyed. I'm shaking. I'm filled with adrenaline. I was not expecting. I just expected to be a French or Italian Pope. So to be American is a huge blessing.
Our North America editor Sarah Smith has this reaction from Washington.
We saw Donald Trump, the president, congratulating him, saying that it's an honor to realize that he will be the first American Pope. What excitement, what a great honor for our country, he said. I mentioned that he looked forward to meeting Pope Leo XIV. So Donald Trump is celebrating what I think a lot of Catholics here would think a very, very significant moment, the first American Pope. Something of a surprise, because Americans were always considered to be at a significant disadvantage and very unlikely to be chosen as the new pontiff. But now that we have an American one, I imagine there will be great celebrating here in America.
And what was, or do we know anything about Cardinal Prevost's relationship with the members of the American government, or with Donald Trump, or with J.D. Vance, the vice president?
Well, interesting. J.D. Vance, of course, is a devout Catholic who quite often talks about his faith when he's talking about politics. But Cardinal Prevost, as he was at the time, has been on social media criticizing the vice president directly when he was using the Bible to back up Trump administration immigration policies. For instance, he was rebuked and criticized by the cardinal for that. So he's somebody who certainly, in his previous role, was more than happy to speak out when he saw the administration doing something he didn't agree with, especially when using Christian teachings to try and justify their policies. So it'll be very, very interesting to see if he continues in that vein, because, of course, as the first American Pope, criticism of what the administration is doing would be that much louder, land that bit harder here in America as a result of him having been chosen.
That was our North America editor Sarah Smith speaking to Mariam Bashiri. You're listening to the Newsroom from the BBC World Service. Now let's take a look at some of the other news stories today. The founder of Microsoft, Bill Gates, has announced he plans to give away most of his entire fortune over the next 2 decades. He expects to donate more than $200 billion between now and 2045 to programs to eradicate diseases and alleviate poverty. He has taken aim at the US, the UK and France for reducing their foreign aid budgets, and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, for his role in cuts to US welfare. Our correspondent Caroline Hawley reports.
Bill Gates, one of the world's wealthiest men, said that when he was gone, many things would be said about him, but he was determined that one of them wouldn't be: he died rich. The Gates Foundation he set up a quarter of a century ago is now a huge player in the aid world, especially in global health. But as he approaches 70 later this year, he wants to accelerate its work.
Well, I wish I had even more time, but, I have to say, okay, this is the last part of my life, and I'm a steward of these resources. I should make sure that it's well spent.
He has ambitious plans, aiming to eradicate malaria, measles and other diseases, and to ensure no woman, baby or child dies of preventable causes. As he made the announcement, he expressed bitter anger to journalists about swingeing aid cuts in the US and the role of Donald Trump's advisor Elon Musk in them. The world's richest man was, he said, responsible for the death of its poorest children. No philanthropic organisation could make up what he called the gulf in funding left by the aid cuts in the US, as well as the UK, France and elsewhere. The challenges ahead were, he said, daunting, adding that he'd like to be around to see the money spent.
I hope I'm still alive when we finish the 20 years, but I'll save a little bit to be able to buy hamburgers as much as I need.
So almost his entire fortune, but not quite everything.
Caroline Hawley there. Now, it's a landmark day for the so-called special relationship, as President Trump hailed what he called a historic trade deal with the UK. Tariffs will be removed from British steel and aluminium, and there is billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, including beef, ethanol, and other agricultural and farm products. The UK will reportedly buy $10 billion worth of Boeing airplanes. President Trump made the announcement in a crammed Oval Office packed with journalists, and the UK Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, dialed in, paying tribute to American negotiators, saying the timing of the deal on the anniversary of VE Day could not be more apt. Mr. Trump explained what he saw as the merit of the deal.
This is now turning out, I think, really to be a great deal for both countries, because it'll be really great for the UK also. So they're opening up the country. Their country is a little closed, and we appreciate that. There won't be any red tape. Things are going to move very quickly both ways.
Benefits for the UK also include a reduced levy on cars exported to the US from 27.5% to 10%. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, described it as a really important day as he spoke to workers at a car factory near Birmingham in England.
I'm really pleased to announce to you, and I wanted to come to you to announce that we've agreed the basis of a historic economic prosperity deal. And that is a deal that will protect British businesses and save thousands of jobs in Britain.
Well, our UK political correspondent Rob Watson joins me now from Westminster. Rob, this was trailed last night with huge fanfare. President Trump posting a major trade deal with a big and highly respected country, the first of many, post in all capital letters. Is this really as big a deal for the two countries as they're telling us?
No, it's not. Not at this stage, at any rate. And President Trump is well known for being a rather great salesman. That's what he did before. But this is much more an exercise in damage limitation, certainly as far as the UK is concerned, because, as you said, some tariffs have been reduced, but essentially Britain's trading position with the United States is worse than it was a few months ago when Joe Biden was president.
So this is more about the politics for both countries then, is that the case?
Well, politics is hugely important. I mean, I should say that the ambition is that this rather narrow agreement that's been reached would be expanded over the next year into a fuller sort of trade agreement. Whether that happens or not, whether it's advantageous to the UK, who knows? We're not at that point. But the politics is all important. To take the US first, I think President Trump was keen to indicate to the world that his policy, which many people think is pretty unconventional, of these tariffs, of a sort of bullying approach, is paying off, given the criticism domestically from many economists, from the financial markets, and from many voters to say, look, I've been tough, and hey, look, I've got a deal with the UK. So that's the politics from the president's side. I mean, from the UK side, getting a deal now, it has a particular practical benefit for Mr. Starmer. There's some specific industry you mentioned where he was, the car industry, so that's good news there, some jobs saved. But it's about saying, look, my approach to Donald Trump, which many people, of course, would say was smacked a little bit of neediness and desperation, it sort of paid off. I mean, Britain has got the first deal, yes, a narrow and limited one, but hey, we've got the first deal.
And it's a well-timed optical win, isn't it, for Keir Starmer, after his Labour Party did quite badly in local elections last week?
That's exactly the point, Julia. I mean, this government has become spectacularly unpopular, spectacularly quickly, not that it was particularly loved when it was elected last July. So this is a bit of a win after those election results. But again, I think you have to put all of this in perspective. I mean, even this limited deal is not going to have much effect on the UK economy. It's thought that growth will still be pretty stagnant for the rest of this decade. And so while, yes, a bit of short-term relief for Keir Starmer, the headwinds are there.
All right. Thank you for that reality check. Our correspondent Rob Watson in Westminster for us. Well, to Ukraine now. And Ukraine has said the 3-day ceasefire declared by the Russian president is turning into a farce. Vladimir Putin ordered the truce to coincide with Russia's commemorations to mark the end of the Second World War, with 20 foreign leaders, including China's President Xi Jinping, in Moscow for a huge military parade on Friday. But Ukraine's foreign minister said that Mr. Putin's forces had continued attacks across the entire front line. There were more than 700 ceasefire violations in 12 hours, he said. Russia, for its part, insisted it was observing the truce while also responding to attacks by Ukraine. Our correspondent Yogita Lemaya is close to the city of Pokrovsk, which Russian soldiers have been trying to seize for months.
We're in a city in eastern Ukraine which is close to the front lines where some of the fiercest fighting has been going on in Ukraine. It's a city that's faced missile attacks in the past
2 months. This is the impact of one of them, and it also frequently faces attacks from drones. And we've come here today to find out from the residents if they've seen or heard anything different from when the ceasefire that Russia had called for was to come into effect at midnight between Wednesday and Thursday. What they have told us is that the night was quieter last night, and that so far they haven't seen or heard any drones flying into the city. But from the outskirts of the city, we could hear the continuous sounds of explosions and bombardment, literally 2 or 3 explosions every minute. So it didn't sound like a ceasefire there. And we're about 20 kilometers from the closest Russian positions. And earlier today, we were at a Ukrainian artillery position, and there too, it did not sound like a ceasefire. We heard the sounds of explosions, both incoming and outgoing artillery fire. And soldiers there also told us that they did face a Russian assault overnight. Now, this was a ceasefire that had been unilaterally proposed by Russian President Vladimir Putin to coincide with the anniversary of the end of World War II, which is celebrated as Victory Day on Friday. But it was a proposal that had not been accepted by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who's instead said that Ukraine is at any point willing to accept and implement the 30-day ceasefire that's been proposed by America, because it feels that that would be a more meaningful way forward.
Yoga Delamay in the Ukrainian front lines. Now let's go back to the Vatican to discuss our top story, the election of the first American pontiff, Pope Leo XIV. It took cardinals 4 votes to decide on Cardinal Robert Prevost. So what comes next? Let's speak to our correspondent again, Mark Lowen, who's in St. Peter's Square. Mark, you were talking to us earlier about the new Pope, and he's relatively young, 69. It meant that he wasn't among the forerunners of the Conclave.
He wasn't seen as one of the top 2 or 3 candidates among us journalists, Julia, but he was thought of as papabile, as the Italians say, which is the word meaning a possible pope. And so luckily we had a little profile of him among all the cardinals whom we had profiled. He's 69, and yeah, in cardinal terms, that is relatively young to be chosen as pope. I mean, Francis was 76 when he was chosen in 2013. So, you know, towards the end of the 60s, I mean, he's at the kind of sweet spot, I suppose, for cardinals, where he's not too young, not too old. It could be quite a lengthy papacy if Pope Leo XIV remains in good health. You know, the cardinals had to decide who they wanted, and potentially for the long haul.
I can hazard a guess at what is the #1 Google search this evening around the world, as everyone frantically tries to find out more information about who is leading 1.4 billion Catholics around the world. Mark, what will this new Pope be doing this evening and in the coming days? I imagine he won't be able to visit his favourite restaurant in Rome for quite some time.
I doubt it. I mean, the lights are on in St. Peter's Basilica now, and the curtains are drawn, so I'm sure he is resting, whether it be in the rooms there on the top of the Basilica, or whether he is resting in the papal study. And on Sunday at noon will be his first Angelus prayer. That is the prayer that the popes give to the audience here on St. Peter's Square every Sunday. It is a prayer that is usually given from the window of the papal study. So that is what we're expecting on Sunday. What he has in plan for tomorrow, we don't know. Maybe a day of rest after this intense moment, the conclave. We will never know exactly what happened and how many votes he got, because of course it is such a secretive process, but at least we know that he was elected after the 4th vote, getting the necessary 2/3 majority, 89 votes in the among the cardinal electors, 133 of them deciding it was time, for the first time, for an American Pope.
Mark Lowen there, observing history in St. Peter's Square. Let's leave you now with the moment that tens of thousands of worshippers that he's standing with broke into applause at the sight of white smoke, waving flags as they watched that smoke billowing across the blue sky of Rome as the bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang out to announce a new pope to lead the world's 1.4 billion Roman Catholics.
In half an hour, we focus on Africa. Then don't miss some science in action.
We're taking a close look at the White House's new rules banning gain-of-function research on viruses of the kind they say led to the COVID pandemic. Also, a massive volcanic eruption on Jupiter's moon Io, as big as some of the biggest we've seen on this planet.
At 21 GMT, we join Outlook.
Lorraine Allen had moved to Merrimack, New Hampshire because it seemed so healthy. When she realised the water supply was contaminated by chemicals from local industry, she took action. At first, people called her Crazy Lady. Now they call her Water Warrior.
And on the BBC World Service app, The Interview.
We meet former US President Joe Biden as he reflects on 80 years since VE Day and the lessons the world should learn in his first interview since leaving the White House.
For more, just go to the BBC World Service app.
It's almost impossible to predict Manchester United's next step in this topsy-turvy season, but Ruben Amorim's side are 90 minutes away from a place in the Europa League final, which could bring silverware, but more importantly, European Champions League football back to Old Trafford next season. We'll look ahead to their semi-final second leg against Athletic Club on Thursday Sport Today. Also on the show with me, Maz Faruqi, American businesswoman Michelle Kang on her plans to revolutionise women's football.
BBC News with Govinda Gill. The new Pope is Robert Prevost, the first ever American to lead the Roman Catholic Church. The 69-year-old has chosen the name Leo XIV. Robert Prevost spent years as a missionary in Peru and is seen as a reformer, similar to his predecessor Francis. In his first address from the balcony above St. Peter's Square, Pope Leo called on Roman Catholics to build bridges using dialogue to unite people in peace. Born in Chicago into a family of Italian, French and Spanish origins, Robert Prevost went to high school at an Augustinian seminary. He was sent to study in Rome at the age of 27. Those who know him say he's a good listener. President Trump has called the election of the first US Pope a great honour for America. He said meeting him would be a very meaningful event. India says 3 military stations near the border in Indian-administered Kashmir have been targeted by Pakistani missiles and drones. It said they'd been destroyed. Pakistan denied its forces had carried out any attack. Microsoft's founder, Bill Gates, says he'll give away almost his entire fortune over the next 2 decades, then close his foundation. He's earmarked $200 billion for the world's poorest, but said that could not make up what he called the gulf in funding left by aid cuts. President Trump and the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer have announced a deal on trade which will reduce duties and open markets. US taxes on steel and aluminium will be scrapped and that on cars cut. The Turkish authorities have barred access to the social media account of Istanbul's jailed opposition mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. They say one of his tweets is under investigation. There have been further attacks by the Sudanese paramilitary RSF, with 2 girls killed in Omdurman, twin city of the capital, Khartoum. That's the latest BBC News.